we're frankly excited about that piece, but the problem is we don't have the resources to support it. When we look at some of the other things that make up that $1 million that costs us, you asked for some examples. Some of those are associated with some great programs, and Pete spoke about those. Some programs that look at social emotional well-being, prevention, and those kinds of things. But those often are bills that also have been passed without fiscal notes that really address both the cost to the state and the cost to local districts. So we will be forwarding some examples of those things that we think in times of great fiscal constraint make it very difficult for us to move forward on without impacting the classroom. And it's not that we disagree with them, it's not that we don't think those are things that we should be doing, but just like you, when we come back to our local communities, we have to sit in front of our constituents and say, what's our charge, what's our mission? And our core mission is to be able to provide a good education to each and every child in our community. So those are the things we're looking at. Some other examples would be, the opt-out option for testing out of classes, which it sounds great. I think we favored that. It makes sense. But how do you put that together so that if you're a school, an accredited high school, how do we come up with the testing mechanism that justifies that student's ready to go on and really is proficient in that? Those are things that we need help with. That needs to be addressed somewhat on a state basis to make sure that when students test out of that, that they actually have those proficiencies. So that's an undetermined cost. And then one other piece that we've looked at a bit is what's the cost of career and technical readiness assessment. We got rid of the high school graduation qualifying exam, which we all agreed was a good thing to do. And now we still have to have some sort of an assessment for students to graduate. And some of those assessments can either be the work keys, ACT, or SAT. Great thing to do. Our question is, do we want to mandate that students do that, or do we want to make sure students understand and compel them to take those tests as a way forward to enable them to move on to career and technical education or higher education? I heard a great presentation by the superintendent of the Phoenix Unified School District this past fall, and I thought he hit it right on the head. One of the things that he said is, we don't think about K-12 in Phoenix Unified, and they're like 80% free and reduced lunch. We don't think about K-12, we think about K-20. And we ensure that every student has the opportunity to take those exams and encourage them to take them if they want to. And that's something at the local level that we could do. But as a mandate, it may cost us additional time in the classroom and cost the district additional money. So what I'm saying is, sometimes there's mandates that seem like they're really great things, but they have unintentional consequences. And when you have the time to reflect back on those, we see where those costs might be. So some examples of things that we're looking at in Sitka. We're trying to take a look at things in a strategic budget. We're very focused on strategic planning and making sure that those things come into the district with good forethought. So thank you.
We have some folks leaving, not because they're bored, but because they have committees they have to be part of. Representative Kito.
Thank you, Senator Dunleavy. And I do have a meeting at 1:30 also, but I do have a question. I think one of the things that could benefit us as lawmakers, as we pass laws, it is difficult for us to request fiscal impacts for anything beyond state government. So I'm curious if you have a suggestion or an idea of how we as a legislature will be able to identify what the potential impacts of a piece of law are in advance, because it seems as though we had our public hearings, there are things that were unanticipated or unintended, and unanticipated for the term in terms of the amount of money. So do you have any thoughts for us for how we could, if we pass a law, understand the fiscal impacts before it goes forward?
That's a great question, Representative, and I don't have a great answer for that right off the top of my head. I would say that part of that responsibility comes back to school boards and constituents to really stay up on the issue and try to envision what that might, what the consequence might be. Unfortunately, I think some of it is going to be, we simply won't know until it actually happens and we have to go back and take a look at it. But we shouldn't be afraid of going back and taking a look at it and making those adjustments if need be. I think one of the things that I've heard over the last couple of days, certainly from school board members, but especially from superintendents, is going into this session where we have these large fiscal constraints that are challenging us, is that we have a lot. We actually have too much on our plate right now. And so we want to make sure that maybe we can take some things off of that plate and we can keep other things from coming onto the plate that exacerbate that. So I think part of the answer is we'll need to work harder to ensure that we get you that information. And then maybe the other part of it is make sure you ask us to provide you that information and remind us that that's something that's critical.
Thank you. Representative Reinbold.
Yes.
Thank you very much. First of all, I'd like to just state House Bill 140 was a bill. It's the Regulatory Impact Transparency Act. And when regulations are being passed, they're supposed to do in aggregate a cost of the impacts to the municipalities, to the private sectors, and other agencies. So that is a bill. It was my bill last year that got through, thank goodness, both the House and the Senate. So in regulations, they are supposed to be doing an assessment. So I do want to make everybody aware of that. Second, I just want to ask you in regards to, you said you're being forced to adopt these standards, change curriculum, do these evaluation systems. One, I want to know who is forcing you to do this, and if you consider this a loss of local control or an unintended mandate. It sounded like if you were an unfunded mandate, you were considering that. And if you don't do this, what is the penalty?
Well, I would say that, you know, as part of that whole, the new state standards that came along, the Department of Education said, you know, here are, and the State Board of Education said, here are the new Alaska state standards. And we want to move in this direction. And then part of that was the new assessment that was coming. So in order for us to align with what we think, what the new assessment was going to be, and part of this, of course, is dependent upon the ESEA, Department of Education, and those requirements within ESEA. What did we have to do? We had to take a look at the current standards that we were working with, and then we had to figure out what standards we wanted to adopt. We didn't feel like it was necessarily a removal of local control. We had that ability at the board table and in the community to take a look at what we wanted to do, and that's what we did. Not everybody agreed with it, I'll admit that, but we moved that direction. The one thing that we did say was that because of the new measures of progress and the new standards, we have to fulfill that with additional, you know, new curriculum and professional development for the teaching staff and everybody to know where they're going. So that was the part that we felt was not well supported, because that had to come directly from our general fund.
Follow up?
Well, I guess what I was saying is, so are you saying DEED is telling you that you need to do this?
Well, it was, yeah, it was part. It was a part of what we understood was something that the State Board of Education and the Department of Education, with the new exam that was going to be coming online, we needed to make sure that we were going to be ready for our students to be able to take that exam, that assessment, and that's a requirement of the state.
Is there any penalties?
Well, right now, I don't know what those penalties would be, other than if you look in state statute that you're required to take those exams. I don't know that that's well defined exactly what those penalties would be. So would we then risk any federal funds or state funds being allocated to our district because we did not participate in those measures of progress? I can't answer that for certain. Maybe my superintendent could, or there may be somebody else in this room that could. But we felt like you know, it was something that we needed to do, and we weren't willing to risk that portion.
Thank you, Lon.